In the past weeks, Chicago has become the center of a heated national debate, not about its famous skyline, or even its history with crime, or even its food, but about whether the federal government can send its military to patrol its streets. President Donald Trump has made headlines by threatening to deploy the National Guard and armed federal agents to the city, claiming it's the only way to restore order. His supporters say it's a bold move, necessary to crack down on crime and illegal immigration, but critics, including Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson, argue it's unconstitutional, dangerous, and more about politics than safety. This clash isn't about just one city, it's about the limits of federal power and the future of American democracy. What happens when Washington decides it knows better than local officials? And what happens when the line between law enforcement and military power starts to blur? Today, we're breaking down the battle over Chicago, the law, the numbers, and the bigger implications for the rest of the country. The controversy started with the announcement of Operation Midway Blitz, a federal crackdown targeting undocumented immigrants and so-called sanctuary cities. Chicago, one of the largest sanctuary cities in the U.S., quickly became a focal point. President Trump went further, suggesting that if local officials don't cooperate with federal immigration authorities, he could send in the National Guard to take control. Reports even mentioned the possibility of Guard troops working alongside ICE agents to enforce deportations and maintain order in immigrant neighborhoods. For many Chicagoans, this raised immediate alarm. Historically, the National Guard is only deployed to cities during extreme emergencies, national disasters, riots, or when local law enforcement is completely overwhelmed. But here, the justification wasn't clear. Was Chicago truly in a state of crisis, or was this just about sending a political message? By framing the city as lawless, Trump built the case for his extraordinary action. But the question remained, was it legal and was it even true? To understand the pushback, you have to look at the law. The Posse Comitatus Act, passed in 1878, restricts the use of the U.S. military in domestic law enforcement. The National Guard is a unique case. It could be deployed by either the president or the governor, depending on circumstances. But when it comes to local law enforcement, governors usually hold the final say. That's why Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker immediately denounced Trump's threat, calling it unconstitutional and vowing to block any unauthorized deployment. Legal experts warn that sending troops into Chicago without state approval would trigger lawsuits, potentially reaching the Supreme Court. Even if the president argues it's about national security or immigration enforcement, courts have historically been wary of blurring the lines between military power and civilian policy. The fight isn't just legal jargon, it's about who controls America's streets, elected local officials or Washington, D.C. The outcome could redefine federal authority for decades to come. So what's actually happening in Chicago? Despite the political rhetoric, crime in the city has been declining. Official numbers show shootings and homicides are down compared to recent years, and Mayor Brandon Johnson points to community-based programs, better policing strategies, and grassroots efforts as reasons for improvement. Yet the White House paints a very different picture, one of chaos, crime, and disorder. The disconnect between data and political messaging is striking. For immigrant communities, the fear is real. There have been multiple ICE raids that have rattled families, and the prospect of uninformed troops patrolling neighborhoods feels like a nightmare. Teachers have reportedly seen more empty classrooms, with children kept home out of fear that their parents could be detained or even they could be detained at school. Local leaders argue that deploying the Guard wouldn't just fail to solve problems, it would make them worse by eroding trust, spreading fear, and pushing communities further into the shadows. In other words, the numbers tell one story, but the politics tell another. History gives us plenty of warnings about what happens when military force is used in civilian life. The National Guard has been deployed during riots in Los Angeles, during Hurricane Katrina, and in Washington, D.C. after protests. Sometimes it restores order, but often it sparks tension and deepens divides. In Chicago, critics fear a worst-case scenario: armed clashes between federal troops and local residents, confusion over authority between police and guard, and long-term damage to civil liberties. Immigrant communities already under stress could face even more trauma, and the sight of troops in American streets could normalize militarization in a way that's hard to undo. Once that line is crossed, it's easier for future administrations to do the same. Whether the justification is crime, protests, or even political dissent. This is why so many legal scholars and civil rights advocates say the Chicago situation is bigger than just Chicago, which is so true. It's about whether America remains a country of civilian law enforcement or drifts towards military dictatorship policy. As of now, the situation remains fluid. The ICE raids have been crazy here though, man. The Trump administrations continue to threaten deployment though, while Chicago and Illinois officials prepare legal challenges. Community groups are mobilizing, staging protests, and demanding protection for vulnerable residents. I live here, man. There's like a protest every weekend. Lawsuits are being drafted to stop any troop deployment before it starts. The outcome will depend on several factors, though. Whether the president issues a formal order, whether state officials can block it, and how quickly courts can intervene. But beyond the legal wrangling, the public debate is just as important. Will Americans accept the idea of soldiers in their streets in the name of safety, or will they push back, demanding that local control and civil liberties remain intact? Chicago is the test case, well, I guess you could say Los Angeles too, and how this plays out could shape how federal power is used in cities across the country. The battle over Chicago isn't just about crime statistics or immigration enforcement. It's about who holds power in a democracy. The people who live in a city, or the politicians in Washington who claim they know best. If National Guard troops are sent into Chicago without state approval, it would mark a dramatic shift in the balance between federal and local authority. For some, it might look like strength. For others, it would look like an overreach. But for everyone, it raises the same fundamental question. When does the pursuit of safety cross into the militarization? Chicago may be the battleground today, but tomorrow it could be any city. It could be fucking Alaska. Anyways, let me know if y'all fuck with these type of videos, man. I know I usually do rap, hip hop, all this current shit, but I like this shit too. I'll see y'all. Thank you.